I want to send a message to every survivor of sexual assault. You have a right to be heard, and you have a right to be believed.
Here's a little question. Why does everyone think that victims of rape are making it up? I literally do not get it. Now there's a new documentary out, which I'm dying to see, called The Hunting Ground, which profiles several students who have been assaulted. Why does everyone think that victims of rape are making it up? I literally do not get it. Well, maybe I do.
All right, I started off the introduction to this video showing an article. I actually don't want to get into that article. It certainly implies some serious female privilege, and that, of course, female worries and concerns and fears are more important than men being wrongfully sent to jail, of course. But I'll link to that article down in the video description if you're interested in reading it. But what I want to talk about is a related privilege, actually. It's another article, and let's get to that. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and dive in here and do an off-the-cuff reading of this article. I browsed it the other day. I really didn't take it in. What I did take in aggravated me, and you'll probably see why as we go through this article. But, just for the purposes of this video, I'll go ahead and dive right in and read it. All right, so here we go. There are several ways an undergraduate suitor. I'm not even 10 words in and it's already retarded. Who talks like this? Who's the author? Allison P. Davis. What planet is Allison P. Davis from? What is this, Victorian era England? All right, I hate to sidetrack already, but let's just take a look at the definition of the word suitor, shall we? A man who pursues a relationship with a particular woman with a view to marriage. If you're a personal friend of Allison P. Davis and you're watching this video, can you let her know that college-age men these days are not out there in the hookup culture looking for the perfect wife? They're not interacting with women in college to get married. Those days are long dead and gone, and good riddance. I mean, what the hell? All right, moving right along. There are several ways an undergraduate suitor can react when his anti-rape activist date... Wait. She's a date, but he's a suitor? Are you sure you didn't mean anti-rape activist debutante? Whatever. When his anti-rape activist date explains what she does. One of the most common is a sort of primal response, an instinctual, indignant protest. Not all men. Yeah, it's indignant and it's a protest, and there's something wrong with men telling their date that they're not a rapist. That's just terrible. Even though the whole hysteria out there is that there's a rape culture and 1 in 5 women get raped on campus, and all this mythological statistics going on, but it's bad for men to take that in and try to reassure women that they're not like that. All right, so obviously that's going to be the sort of philosophical underpinning, if you want to say this article has one. It's going to be the philosophical underpinning of the rest of this article. I don't really want to engage with that, even though I'm probably going to be forced to as I read through this. To some extent, I'm going to have to engage with it. The Amazing Atheist just put out a video which kind of takes the legs out from under this idea that it's bad for guys to say not all men. And I'll put a link to that video in the video description. So if you're interested in a good takedown of that argument, go ahead and watch that video. Anyway, moving right along. And according to a number of women who have become campus leaders in the growing conversation around consent, that's hardly the worst case scenario. Okay, it's bad, but it's not the worst. Okay, it's bad for men to reassure women that they're not rapists. Okay? These women have had their stories and their mission written up in student papers and in national ones. They've had bylines and quotes in the New York Times, interviews in the Huffington Post, and on Dateline. They become poster children for sexual politics. And with their crusade often comes a weird social life. Here we go. They're out there fighting the good fight. But do they also get to hook up like normal college students? No, they don't. And you want to know why? Because normal college students are not bamboozled by these bullshit feminist statistics like 1 in 5 women being raped on campus. Normal college students don't believe that there's an actual rape culture out there. So they don't do things like become an anti-rape campus activist. And they don't become a campus leader in the growing conversation around consent. Okay? So if you choose to do that, you're going to have to deal with the consequences. Okay? Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me get back to the article. Megan Warner, a senior at UC Berkeley, serves as the director of the university's Sexual Assault Commission and is part of a federal complaint against the school for its mishandling of assault cases. Okay? She's already appeared in a Glamour issue honoring college... Wow, she's in a Glamour issue. Honoring college women who are about to change the world. Okay, in a Glamour issue... Usually people who are going to change the world aren't in Glamour. Sorry, but are they going to change the fashion world? Are they going to change the makeup world? And she says there were men who wouldn't approach her or date her after recognizing her or learning of her work. Because, of course, men can't be self-sufficient in this regard. They can't determine who they do or do not want to date. They're men. They're not allowed to do this. Only women are allowed to do this.
Nobody ever explicitly said, "Oh, you're a survivor, we can't date,"
she told me.
But they'd assume I was just doing this for attention, or more frequently, they didn't want to deal with it. It was too much. They assumed I'd have a lot of needs.
Gosh, I don't know where they'd get that idea. You're part of a federal complaint against the very school they go to, and they're not allowed to factor this into the decision of whether or not they want to date you. That, you may be too much trouble. They're not allowed to come to this conclusion because they're men. Now, you're allowed to take all of their little nitty-gritty microaggressions, if we're going to give that term legitimacy. You're allowed to take all their little reactions and their facial tics and this and that. You're allowed to take that as a sign that they're not suitable, but they're not allowed to do any of that themselves. Right. Okay. Moving right along. Then there were those who were a little too eager to make it known, a little typo there, to make it known that they would never ever assault a woman. Let's see. You're part of a federal complaint against the school regarding sexual assault cases. Why on earth would they ever go there? Gee, I just don't know.
Their first response is, "I'm not one of those guys. I would never do that,"
she said.
I mean, what? Should I be carrying gold stars now?
Yeah, okay. So you're patronizing on top of being, this privileged elitist who gets to make all the dating decisions and men don't. Right. Moving right along once again. Chrissy Keenan, a UCLA senior, is the president of Bruin Consent Coalition, a campus group that works to raise awareness regarding sexual assault on campus.
When the people know of me, but they don't really know the work, they hear the term feminist or sexual violence prevention. They think super extreme bra-burning feminism,
she explains, which often puts people on the defensive. Keenan herself, though, sometimes finds it hard not to go on the offensive. She's so used to laying down the nitty-gritty details of consent. In other words, she's so busy patronizing her suitors because they don't know what consent is, only women know what consent is, that she's been known to open romantic interactions with a spiel that feels straight out of a student handbook. Gosh, I have no idea why men would go on the defensive and start, backpedaling and explaining that they're not rapists. I mean, it's just so shocking that they would do this. Again, moving along, she animatedly tells a story about a recent Tinder rendezvous.
One time I agreed to meet with this guy at 8 or 9 at night. Before we met, I said to him, "This is the work I do. I know the chief of police, so don't try and get creepy. I know all my rights." And 5 minutes later, he was like, "Actually, I'm not really okay with how you just assume I'm a bad guy. And I get very bad vibes from that, so we shouldn't hang out anymore." I was in a rage. He was a total fuckboy about consent,
she said. Okay, I really don't see any reason to read the rest of this article. This statement right here, I mean, it just highlights the delusional privilege that these women operate with. First of all, for those of you who don't know, fuckboy just means, it's a totally loaded, and I hate to say it, gendered term, okay? I don't care that it is, but feminists should care if we're listening to what they tell us. Fuckboy means, in street lingo, it means a weak-ass pussy, okay? He's a pussy. That's what this feminist, who is an anti-rape activist, is calling this potential quote-unquote suitor. So, it's just incredible to me. You can base your political activism, your great mission in life, on a fantasy, on these bogus statistics that 1 in 5 women get raped on campus and there's a rape culture out there. You can base your goal in life on this myth, but men are not allowed to factor this into their decision on whether or not they want to date you. They're total fuckboys if they do this. Now, it's like coming across someone who really thinks they're an elf and is helping Frodo actually bring the Ring of Power to Mount Doom. That's essentially what coming across one of these women is like. It's somebody who's just operating with a fantasy in their head and trying to make it reality. Now, to some degree, this statistic has been debunked so efficiently and so many times, this 1 in 5 women get raped and the fact that there's a rape culture out there, that I'm suspecting, and this I think is really the point here, I'm suspecting that these college anti-rape activists, these women who are all upset about with these men who are total fuckboys about consent, that's really not the issue here. What's really the issue is, and you know what, that word at the beginning, now that I'm thinking about it, that word suitor is really telling. Because what's supposed to happen in these women's minds is that men are supposed to crash on the shore of femininity just like the ocean, at a constant rate. They're just supposed to keep coming and throwing themselves up against the jetty, the shoreline. They are not supposed to have their own agency when it comes to dating and make dating decisions, make decisions about who can have sex themselves. And that's really the problem here. That's really why these women are so irritated, because one of their many societal privileges to determine who has sex is under extreme threat here. Men are sick of it. They're sick of the bullcrap, and they're making good decisions. They're making responsible decisions for themselves. Why would you, as a college-aged man, date someone who more than likely thinks yes means yes legislation is a good thing, believes Emma Sulkowicz, believes Jackie, believes the Duke lacrosse team accuser, and on and on and on? Or if she doesn't believe all that, if she doesn't believe the 1 in 5 statistic, if she doesn't believe Jackie, if she doesn't believe Emma, because she's started to believe the arguments against all that nonsense, then what she's doing is even worse, because she is completely disingenuous on many levels. She is telling people what they want to hear because it's socially, career-wise, politically beneficial for her to do so. She's even more of a danger to college-aged men because she is a total two-faced person who's just interested in herself. Why would you unnecessarily put yourself at risk of being falsely accused? This is a person who has devoted her life to fighting against a complete myth, to fighting against 1 in 5 women being raped out there when it's not actually happening. So obviously, this is a person who probably you shouldn't even be in a room alone with, let alone dating. And so college-aged men who are not as stupid as everybody thinks are now making decisions about having sex that previously they would never have made. They would have just jumped in the sack with this person and, would have let the chips fall where they may. But they know now that that's a severe risk. They know that they should be the ones making decisions about who has sex in college. And that's the problem. They are threatening women's privilege. And that's it for this video. Thanks for tuning in.